Sam Giancana was the most flamboyant gangster of them all, when organized crime was at its most extravagant.
I'd say he was far more powerful than Al Capone, and he was a giant.
He had a beautiful showbiz girlfriend. He was pals with Frank Sinatra.
Sam Giancana didn't like to keep a low profile. He liked the big life. He liked to be seen with the stars.
He was worth millions and had the power of life or death.
He killed a lot of people, had a lot of people killed.
One cold stare from you and it could cause you to become very concerned.
If you crossed him, you were in deep trouble.
But in helping elect a clean young president and assisting in the CIA's murkiest operations, his career sees the mafia and politics mix into a deadly cocktail. The pursuit of Sam Giancana is the ultimate story of the state versus the mob. And the final chapter is one of the most notorious mafia hits of all. Sam Giancana had learned his gangster trade from Al Capone's top enforcers. He excelled as a driver, delivering killers to murder their victims and evade the cops. He learned how to lend money and collect the interest.
Hey, Sam, loan me a $5. I got to go get something. He said, what do you take for security? And Sam said, how about a lie?
His furious outbursts were so savage that people around him wondered about his mental stability.
He was violent. But the people in the Chicago outfit almost are all violent. They kill people with the drop of a hat.
He was a killer. Aged just 18, Giancana was charged with murder, but escaped conviction.
When I first saw Sam Giancana, I thought, there is the arrogance, the hatred, the violence, the viciousness that I've dedicated my career to fighting.
For the mob, Giancana's greatest strength was not his violent nature, but his gift for making money. It was Giancana who struck fear into the electricians' union so that every slot machine in Chicago paid the mob. It was Giancana who muscled the black gambling kings out of Chicago with threats and murder. Under his watchful eye, millions of dollars poured in from casinos in Las Vegas and Cuba. And by 1957, aged 49, Sam Mooney Giancana was boss of the Chicago outfit.
Sam Giancana was the most powerful criminal chief in the history of the United States. He had his tentacles into the police, to the courts, to the business world around Chicago.
But just as Giancana reached the top, the government turned on organized crime. An eager young lawyer began fighting to see him and his kind fall. Robert Kennedy.
The nation's underworld gets the unwelcome spotlight of publicity as the Senate's Investigations Subcommittee begins new hearings on crime. Arkansas Senator McClellan...
The Senate Labor Rackets Committee was investigating mafia corruption of the trade unions. Robert Kennedy, as chief legal counsel, made a name for himself by questioning witness after witness about their mob connections.
Did you say that SOB, I'll break his back? Who did you make it about?
I don't know. I may have been discussing somebody in a figure of speech.
Well, who did you make the statement? Whose back were you going to break?
I don't even remember it.
Well, whose back were you going to break, Mr. Hoffa?
Figure of speech, I don't even know who I was talking about, and I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, it was real-life drama, and it was exciting to watch.
On the 9th of June, 1959, The witness was Sam Giancana.
You tell us whether if you have opposition from anybody that you dispose of them by having them stuffed in a trunk. Is that what you do, Mr. Giancana? Would you tell us...
Giancana refused to answer Kennedy's questions by taking what is known in America as the Fifth Amendment.
When you take the Fifth, you say essentially, I respectfully decline to answer on the grounds that my answer might tend to incriminate me, and nobody can touch you for it.
Sam Giancana asserted his Fifth Amendment rights over 30 times.
I declined to answer because I honestly believe my answer might tend to incriminate me.
Chief Counsel Robert Kennedy seemed frustrated and goaded the gangster.
Will you tell us anything about any of your operations, or you just giggle every time I ask you a question?
I declined to answer because I honestly believe my answer might tend to incriminate me.
I thought only little girls giggled, Mr. Giancana.
Bobby Kennedy's theatrics were perhaps intended to light Giancana's famously short fuse.
I think he was hoping that Giancana would explode. But, you know, I never thought he really gave a damn.
Round one in this long, bitter feud went to Sam Giancana. Kennedy could get nothing on him. And there was a reason why the Chicago boss felt untouchable. He was well connected to the Kennedys. Robert Kennedy's big brother, Senator John F. Kennedy, had set his sights on the White House. But just to become the Democrat presidential candidate was a battle. A Boston Irish Catholic couldn't get elected to anything in staunchly Protestant states of 60s America like Wisconsin and West Virginia. The wealthy Kennedy clan would have to buy support in these key primary elections, so they reached out to an influential family friend for help. Frank Sinatra.
Sinatra was a friend of the Kennedy family, and Jack Kennedy in particular.
Frank, in his turn, had a friend and business partner who knew all about getting his way in politics. Sam Giancana.
I have every reason to believe that there was mob money in the West Virginia election. The person who handled the money was Frank Sinatra.
Before voters went to the polls, Giancana sent one of his men to spread $50,000 around West Virginia. He sweetened local politicians with new office furniture and paid bar owners to keep Sinatra's campaign song, High Hopes, playing on jukeboxes across the state. Giancana's efforts seemed to help get the Kennedys over the first hurdle. John F. Kennedy became the Democrat candidate to run for president. But an even bigger challenge lay ahead. In November 1960, John Kennedy faced the sitting Vice President, Richard Nixon, in the race for the White House. The election was too close to call. Pundits were saying that whoever won the state of Illinois would win the presidency. And the key to Illinois was Sam Giancana's backyard, Chicago. Giancana's Chicago outfit knew all about how to swing votes in their city. They'd been doing it for generations.
In this city, no criminal enterprise is going to work until they've got the politicians in their pocket. He had the politicians, and I mean all of them.
One ruse was to send scores of people from precinct to precinct, illegally voting in each one. Another well-worn trick was ghost voting, impersonating deceased residents of a precinct. Mob-controlled unions were prevailed upon to vote Kennedy to a man. There were even claims that Giancana's hoods intimidated voters at the polling stations.
Listening to the radio, listening to the returns coming in, it was obvious that there was a theft underway.
Not since 1916 had the presidential election result been so close. Kennedy beat Nixon by just 0.1%.
Somewhat afternoon on the day after the election, Senator Kennedy received a telegram from the vice president congratulating him on his victory. With this in his pocket,
Sam Giancana was quick to claim that it was he who had elected Kennedy to the White House. While most dispute this, Giancana certainly expected payback.
Giancana can legitimately think that he had done his work and that he had tipped it and that he could expect some result.
Giancana expected the new Kennedy administration to get Bobby off his back. He told an associate,
"Bobby will just be another goddamn lawyer soon. They promised me they'll take care of him."
I am, in my mind, convinced that there was a deal cut. That if Giancana would get Illinois for the Democrats, that he would be given free hand.
Giancana prophesied to the outfit a lessening of government harassment in Chicago and Las Vegas. He couldn't have been more mistaken. New President John F. Kennedy appointed his brother, Bobby, to the government post of Attorney General.
I have felt that we should secure the best talent we could get for every position, regardless of party, regardless of any other factor. This test has been applied, and it's been applied in this case.
Far from being just another lawyer, as Attorney General, the fanatical mob-chasing Robert Kennedy was now the country's top law enforcement officer. It was a shock for Giancana and the Chicago outfit.
The last thing they thought was they would get Robert Kennedy as the Attorney General. Anybody but Robert Kennedy. That was a surprise.
Bobby Kennedy, now in charge of the Department of Justice and the FBI, declared war on the Mafia.
I think that in the field of organized crime, I think it's a very serious situation that's facing the country at the present time. I think a lot of steps can be taken in order to deal with the problem. I think it's gotten much more serious over the period of the last 10 years.
Giancana cursed at the sight of the Attorney General and fumed at the very mention of the Kennedy name. To him, Bobby Kennedy's war on organized crime was a betrayal. But as the Justice Department went to war, Sam Giancana fell in love. Phyllis McGuire was the lead singer of the headlining trio, the McGuire Sisters. She was 29. Giancana was 52. It seems violent Mo Giancana could be charming.
And he wasn't flashy. It was just direct, and it was strength, and his eyes were, it's like they looked through you.
She was a big star, stunningly beautiful, and he loved to be seen out with her on his arm. Giancana began to flood her with gifts of furs, cars, and jewelry. Cash had always bought him the most beautiful escorts, but this was different. He began to neglect business in Chicago to follow Phyllis to performances all over the US. He even accompanied her on a 2-week European tour. The tough mob boss had a chink in his armor, a weak spot the government would later use to help bring him down. While Giancana was romancing Phyllis, Attorney General Bobby Kennedy was hard at work radically reforming the Department of Justice and the FBI.
He was extremely driven. He absolutely hated what he called the outfit, the Mafia, organized crime.
To the 10 FBI agents assigned to Chicago, Kennedy added 60 more. Giancana called them G-men, or just the G. At first he was unconcerned, dismissing them as Boy Scouts. Up to now, their track record against organized crime had not been good. But Kennedy was changing the game. The FBI agents that descended on Giancana were a new breed. They were all clean-cut, college-educated men. Many were lawyers. Above all, the biggest problem for Sam Giancana was that these government men had a fanatical commitment to their incorruptibility. Unlike other Chicago law enforcement, Giancana couldn't buy them. Robert Kennedy was also increasing the number of lawyers in the Justice Department's organized crime and racketeering section from 17 to 63. He rebuilt the whole operation.
You can think of the Department of Justice as an aircraft carrier, and you can't turn an aircraft carrier on a dime. They don't have brakes. You can slow it down and steer it. He turned it on a dime and took it in a different direction.
The Attorney General funded his new crack team of investigators well. His goal was to get all government agencies working together as never before, to break the grip of organized crime.
He talked directly to you. It gave us a whole feeling of electricity in what we were doing and commitment to what we were doing.
We did feel that we were kind of like the new untouchables.
Giancana was now closely watched by the new FBI agents in Chicago.
The view is fine and the kids are still in school. Over.
His HQ was in the back of the Armory Lounge Bar and Restaurant in Chicago's Forest Park suburb. Despite FBI surveillance, his private business remained secret behind closed doors.
Eyeball one to dugout.
I read you loud and clear.
Or so he thought.
10-3, eyeball one. Stay with it.
The G-men had a new weapon that would turn Giancana's world upside down. Electronic surveillance.
Bobby Kennedy decided that organized crime was an issue of national security. It was a threat to the United States and fell in that category that you could exercise a wiretap and install a wiretap without a warrant.
The number of FBI bugs and wiretaps in America exploded from just a handful to hundreds. The FBI agents Romer and Hill, assigned to monitor Giancana, were quick to hide a microphone in the Holy of Holies, his HQ, the Armory Lounge. The G-men overheard Potsy Poe, an old associate, complaining about them to Mooney Giancana.
I never thought it'd be this. You told me when they put his brother in there, we're going to see some fireworks. Well, I never knew it would be like this. This is murder. Concentrate on a certain individual. You mean the outfit? Yeah.
The agents heard exactly how Giancana ran the outfit. Although officially the boss, he received advice from senior mob figures and retired boss Tony Accardo.
Listen, Mo. Oh, we aren't here to try to twist your mind. We're just giving you what's practical. Practical advice, that's all. We're not here to try to distort you.
The tapes also revealed how Giancana advised his driver and bodyguard, Butch Blasi, about the Mafia Code of Silence, Omerta. He warned about the penalties for blabbing mob business to outsiders.
There was a stuffed fish over the bar, and he points up to the stuffed fish. and says,
"You know how that fish got that way? He opened his mouth."
and of course he's saying this into a bug himself, but he's telling Butch Blasey to don't talk about all that kind of stuff.
FBI agents Roma and Hill, in their surveillance of Giancana, did their utmost to exploit his weak spot, the relationship with Phyllis McGuire. They watched Sam and Phyllis closely, very closely. They took photos and shot moving footage of them together when they went out. With wiretaps and bugs, they also listened when they stayed in, even recording their conversation in their bedrooms. Whether in Las Vegas, or Maryland, Pittsburgh, or Atlantic City. The pressure of tight surveillance got to Sam Giancana. His acid anger was fired at the G-men whenever he saw them.
Now Roma, he spots us. He says, "Hello, Mo," and he walks away. So we move out of there into the other room and walks in but that Hill.
Giancana started to lose control. He antagonized the agents and hissed obscenities. Retired boss Accardo was concerned that Giancana would do something stupid.
Don't call them dirty words or anything. Don't pay attention. Just walk away from them. Let them talk. You guys, holler and go themselves and this and that. They're bastards. They're just like us. They got a job to do. We know what to do and we do it. I know.
Bobby Kennedy was tightening the noose. But one government agency had jeopardized all his work by secretly seeking Giancana's help, the CIA. The consequences for the agency and for Giancana would eventually be dire. Giancana and many other gangsters had once had vast, lucrative business interests on the island of Cuba, just a short hop from Miami. In exotic and poverty-stricken Cuba, white tourists with green dollars could live like royalty and lose money in the comfort of the mob-owned casino hotels.
Cuba was a gold mine for the mob. There's a lot of money made down there in the casinos and the joints, and Castro took it away completely.
On New Year's Day, 1959, Fidel Castro's rebel forces swept into Havana and, with popular support, supplanted the old mob-friendly regime of President Batista. Castro swiftly nationalized land and American businesses. He cost the mob and the US government untold millions of dollars.
The mob, they were running Cuba. They were running amok down there under Batista. And when Castro came in, he threw them all out. So they were not happy with him. If they could get rid of Castro, they could move back in.
It wasn't just the mob who wanted Castro gone. The CIA saw Castro as a dangerous communist on America's doorstep, and they wanted him swept away.
So who would you go to? You go to mob guys who had good connections in Cuba. They'd operated there for years and are pretty good at killing people.
On the basis that my enemy's enemy is my friend, the CIA met Giancana and associates to try to arrange a gangland hit on Cuba's president, Fidel Castro.
They're certainly naive about the organized crime. They're not a hit squad. You can't buy them to kill people. They thought they could.
At a clandestine meeting at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami, the CIA wanted a Capone-style attack. with Castro going down in public in a hail of bullets. The real-life gangsters demurred, wanting to keep things nice and clean. Giancana suggested something much more CIA, using pills to poison Castro's food and drink. The CIA took his advice. But when a US government agency secretly commissioned murder from gangsters, they should have seen trouble coming.
And once you've dealt with them and they've given you something, then they have a right to ask for something back. And you don't want a reciprocal relationship with them. You're compromised.
Master manipulator Giancana soon turned the situation to his advantage. First, he's working for the CIA, and then somehow, they find themselves working for him. Giancana suspected Phyllis McGuire of having an affair in Las Vegas with top showbiz comedian Dan Rowan. He talked his CIA contact into arranging to plant a microphone in Rowan's hotel room. But the operation went terribly wrong. The installation engineers were discovered by hotel staff and arrested by police. The CIA feared the mob connection and Castro assassination plot would get out.
The agency did not want that plotting to come public, and they were afraid to death of any public examination of Giancana.
To avoid a public trial, a deeply embarrassed CIA Director of Security, Sheffield Edwards, had to confess in a memo to the FBI the whole sordid affair. When he found out, the Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy, was furious.
And he called Sheffield Edwards in to his offices. And what he said was, the next time you do something like that, you talk to me first.
One day, all this would come back to haunt both the CIA and Sam Giancana. FBI agents Roma and Rutland, watching and being verbally abused by Giancana in Chicago, now put even more pressure on the beleaguered outfit boss. Determined to drive him over the edge, the agents implemented what they called lockstep surveillance. Every day, round the clock, they were with him, following in cars. When he got out, they got out. When he walked, they walked within feet of him. They followed him on his golf round, rushing his game, jeering from the edge of the greens.
They were like this. He played golf, they were behind him, just everywhere he went. And it sent him off like a Roman candle.
They even followed him into restaurants. If he went to the restroom, an agent would also go and stand at the next urinal, which made it difficult for him to do what he had gone there to do.
It was pure, simple harassment. They weren't getting anything out of that.
Roma and Rutland were right about one thing. It drove Giancana mad. An electronic surveillance recording made in June 1963 reveals that his mob associates thought he was becoming dangerously irrational.
Wait till you hear what he's done now. He's not making good decisions. What happened? Charlie McCarthy told Roma that Mo told him to tell Kennedy to talk to him through Sinatra. For Christ's sake, that's a cardinal rule. You don't give up a legit guy. He tells Roma that Sinatra's our guy to Kennedy? More or less. I'm so I could jump out your window. And we gotta do something about this. The TV is driving this man goofy.
A maddened Giancana lashed out in a way the mob would never understand. He sued the FBI. saying their lockstep operation violated his civil rights. Giancana's lawyer hired a film crew to shoot the FBI lockstep in action. In a darkened courtroom, the judge was also shown Giancana's respectable lifestyle. Playing a round of golf, going to church, and visiting his father's grave. An injunction against lockstep surveillance was granted. The FBI agents would have to keep their distance. Sam Giancana had, for the moment, beaten the FBI. But Giancana's victory soon evaporated. And to escape the continual scrutiny, he and Phyllis holidayed at Sinatra's home in Palm Beach, and then in Las Vegas. Meanwhile, the FBI was recording some disturbing mobster conversations.
Kennedy, a guy should take a knife and stab and kill that. I mean it. This is true. Honest to God. Right in the White House. Somebody's got to get rid of that.
The Kennedys' war against organized crime was fueling a dark mood among gangsters all over the United States.
They should kill the whole family. My mother and father, too.
Just a few months later, on November the 22nd, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated during a Dallas motorcade. The killing spawned a rash of conspiracy theories about who might be responsible.
There was always a strong rumor that the mob had something to do with the assassination of John Kennedy.
The rumors of Mafia involvement were fed when it was revealed that the man who gunned down Kennedy's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, was mob fixer Jack Ruby. It didn't go unnoticed that Sam Giancana had sought Ruby's help from time to time. But despite the rumors, there has never been anything to substantiate claims that the mob had any part in it. President Kennedy's death did, however, give the mob what it wanted: the immobilization of his gang-busting brother.
I think he was simply crushed and shocked by it.
An FBI informant heard Giancana's reaction. What he said was chilling.
Attorney General Robert Kennedy will not have the power that he did.
Within a year, the new president appointed a different attorney general, and Robert Kennedy was gone. Giancana thought the pressure was off. But Bobby Kennedy had rebuilt the Justice Department to smash organized crime. Even without him, the machinery worked on. Crucially, Kennedy had inspired a generation of investigative lawyers who would not give up the fight. One of Bobby's boys was a young lawyer in the Department of Justice Strike Force, David Shippers.
Always there was this Sam Giancana hanging out there, the one guy that nobody seemed to be able to touch. All he had to do was surface once, and we'd be able to put him into a conspiracy of some kind. Couldn't find anything.
Shippers' problem was a lack of hard evidence. The FBI agents' years of electronic surveillance put Giancana at the center of extortion, illegal gambling, and murder. But as the bugs were installed under presidential prerogative and not by a judicial warrant, the thousands of hours of incriminating recordings were not admissible as evidence in court. But determined to put Giancana behind bars, shippers meticulously constructed a cunning legal snare. First, to question Giancana about his criminal career, shippers awoke the dormant power of an investigative grand jury.
Without the grand jury, we were dead in the water. We couldn't do a thing because we had no personal subpoena power. It was a grand jury that had the subpoena power.
If you're subpoenaed to the grand jury, you got no choice. You got to show up. You may take the Fifth Amendment, but you're going to get dragged in there.
Second, shippers had to stop Giancana hiding behind the Fifth Amendment by removing any possibility that he could incriminate himself.
If what you're saying can never be used against you, then the Fifth Amendment doesn't apply. That's where the use of immunity came in.
Granting immunity from prosecution to a top mafia boss was a bold step, and a hard sell to shippers' boss, the U.S. attorney.
The U.S. attorney looked at me and he said, "Are you nuts? Are you crazy?" They said, "Well, you don't really think he would talk." We wouldn't immunize him if we didn't think he'd talk. If he doesn't talk, we'll put him in jail. If he does talk, we're going to have one heck of a great case. We'll break the whole stupid mafia.
At last, the trap was set. But would Giancana take the bait? In December 1964, the federal grand jury investigation began. To soften Giancana up, shippers summoned his mob associates to question them in secret. Giancana feared they might be spilling their guts, but he couldn't be sure. Then, to play even more on Giancana's increasing paranoia, shippers exploited his weak spot. He subpoenaed Phyllis McGuire.
So here comes Phyllis McGuire. We're going to put her in the grand jury. I just assumed she's going to come in and answer our questions. And the questions would essentially have been about her association, nothing embarrassing. She was the key to this whole thing.
Phyllis seemed shaken by the experience. Whether she actually testified or asserted her Fifth Amendment rights and declined to answer is still secret. But the thought that Phyllis had told them anything sent the paranoid Giancana crazy.
You know, he said over the weekend that he was pretty angry with you. Have you talked to him about it?
No comment.
Well, the word came back to us that Sam Giancana was ready to kill himself.
Is this an indication, do you think, that your relationship is all over?
No comment.
Because he thought, if she talked, I'm in trouble.
David Shippers scheduled Giancana straight after Phyllis and made sure he reinforced Sam's fears when they met just before questioning.
I had a transcript of another individual's testimony in some case. It was about a half-inch thick. And we had the court reporter put a page on top that said, "Testimony of Phyllis McGuire." And I know Sam saw it.
Shippers had Giancana right where he wanted him, on the witness stand. The Chicago boss thought he knew the rules of this game. He'd plead the Fifth Amendment to each question and go home as usual. But he didn't realize David Shippers had changed the rules.
I remember the judge saying to him, "Mr. Giancana, if you received a traffic ticket on the way in here today, nobody can touch you. You are immune from any prosecution for any crime as of this moment."
Immunity effectively stripped Giancana of Fifth Amendment protection.
And then it really hit him when the judge told him he was immune and he had to talk. He was ordered to testify. Then it hit him.
The single-minded purpose of David Shippers seemed to remind Giancana of an old adversary.
He turned to me and he said, "You're one of Bobby's boys, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am."
Giancana had no choice. If he talked and lied, he was certain to perjure himself. If he talked and told the truth, the mob would kill him. Giancana gave his name and address, invoked the Fifth, and the trap was sprung. Sam Giancana, boss of the Chicago outfit, by refusing to answer questions, was in contempt of court and taken straight to jail.
Sam Giancana was totally awed. He was rattled. He couldn't understand how this could happen.
The judge commented that Giancana had the key to his own cell. He would be released when he decided to answer the grand jury's questions. But in the outfit, you don't talk. Giancana kept his mouth shut. This was a government victory of sorts, as it was the first time he'd been in prison for over 20 years.
That rocked the whole organized crime around the country.
But was it such a great victory? Giancana could only be held in jail until the grand jury folded a year later. On the night Giancana was released, in May 1966, there was a party at his home in Oak Park, but senior mobsters found nothing to celebrate. The outfit old guard decided Mo Giancana's high profile and volatile temper was bad for business. They gave the FBI a belated victory by stripping Sam Giancana of his rank as boss and throwing him out of Chicago for good. Giancana left the US to live in Cuernavaca, Mexico. Over the years, he built a new life for himself. No G-men dogged his steps or monitored his phone calls. And Giancana returned to what he did best, making money. In the mid-60s, as NASA prepared to put a man on the moon, Giancana was launching a gambling operation on cruise ships in the Caribbean. While the US tore itself apart over the Vietnam War, Giancana's international ambitions met with success in Guatemala and with the Shah of Iran. In 1968, his old adversary, Robert Kennedy, ran for president. But on the campaign trail, he was gunned down and killed. And although the 70s saw an aging Giancana undergo abdominal surgery, he enjoyed a quiet, wealthy life. Then, suddenly, a dark episode from his past cast a chill shadow over Sam Giancana, his connection to the CIA. In January 1975, a Senate Select Committee began investigating illegal CIA operations, specifically CIA involvement in plans to assassinate Castro. Its findings would shock Chairman Senator Church.
It is simply intolerable that any agency of the government of the United States may engage in murder.
The committee was very interested in hearing from any mobsters consulted by the CIA in their Castro assassination plots. Although lying low in Mexico, Giancana had been snatched from his hideaway and suddenly found himself deported back into the United States. The press were waiting.
Giancana, why did you have to leave Mexico, sir?
Why? I don't know.
Mr. Giancana, what are your future plans?
The future plans of one-time boss Giancana were to re-establish his cut of Chicago outfit operations.
Once he arrived in Chicago, he announced to the entire organization that he was back and he was the man.
But a new generation ran the Chicago outfit. They had no room for the aging Giancana.
By that time, a lot of his rivals were in the penitentiary or dead because of what we'd been doing to them.
Knocked out of action in Chicago, Giancana received a subpoena that ordered him to appear before the Senate committee without fail in Washington, D.C. on June the 24th, 1975. But Sam Giancana never made it. On June the 19th, 1975, 4 days after celebrating his 67th birthday, Sam Giancana was at home in Oak Park, Chicago. He was cooking in his basement kitchen. Routine police patrols noticed nothing unusual. Health problems meant he could not eat spicy foods. So it seems the sausage and peppers was a late-night snack for a friend. A friend Giancana liked and trusted. A close friend. But the Mafia hadn't quite finished with Sam Giancana. The way he was killed showed that the mob no longer trusted him to keep quiet.
He was shot in the mouth, so that you might draw the conclusion that somebody was leaving a message. Don't talk.
It was somewhat interesting that somebody that powerful was killed, so there had to be a major decision among the powers that be in the mob.
Sam Giancana's extraordinary career had lasted over 50 years, spanning the heyday of organized crime in America. In the years after Giancana, show business stars began to shun any mob connection. The glamorous image of gangsters became tarnished. People realized they were just killers. Never again would a Mafia boss be so closely associated with the bright stars of show business or the dark underbelly of politics. The FBI and the Justice Department had struck the first serious blows aimed at breaking the Mafia. Joe Colombo was a man who liked to do things differently. He was the only mobster who dared to protest against the FBI.
You don't go to war with the United States government. Nobody goes to war with the United States government. They're too powerful.
But Colombo did. His weapon of choice, mass protest.
There's a conspiracy in this country against every Italian American. We've been saying this, we'll continue to say it, and it's only till it touches them.
But in following this path, Colombo moved from crime into politics and the glare of publicity. On the way, he broke the cardinal rule of the Mafia.
He was the one that chose publicity over silence. He was the one that chose cameras over staying in the shadows.
Colombo became infatuated with fame and celebrity and completely forgot the way a mobster should live.
This incensed the old mafioso. They didn't want that. And he was told, stop this. If you continue, you're gonna pay a price.
In the heart of Manhattan, in front of thousands of witnesses, Joe Colombo would face his day of reckoning. Across the East River from Manhattan lies the borough of Brooklyn. In 1962, this was Mafia country. The hunting ground of Joseph Colombo. The 40-year-old mobster lived and worked these streets. He was a capo, or captain, a mid-ranking mafioso in New York's Profaci crime family. One of the 5 crime families that dominated the city's criminal underworld. Then, in 1964, an event took place that would supercharge his career. Colombo was summoned by his Mafia boss to an important meeting. Joe Magliocco had a mission for him. It was a hit, and a particularly dangerous one. For Joseph Colombo, this was nothing new. He had already killed people, about 11 murders to date. Rubbing people out was what capos did.
You would never advance to capo without killing.
If they tell you to kill somebody, you go out and kill somebody. And you don't resign except feet first.
You would not even be considered for capo unless you've murdered somebody on orders from the boss.
So until this moment, Colombo was nothing special within Mafia circles. Just one killer amongst many.
There were plenty of people like that around. Typical kind of hoodlum, nothing outstanding about him that I know of.
But that was about to change forever. The target this time was none other than Carlo Gambino. From a young hoodlum, he had become New York's biggest Mafia godfather.
Gambino was generally regarded as the most powerful boss in the city.
He was unquestionably the most fearsome mobster in town. Gambino had built his family into New York's toughest clan.
He could take on 3 out of the 5 families at one time. That's how big his organization was. And he had some of the best killers that there were. If you killed Carlo Gambino, that was the kiss of death.
So, rather than kill Carlo Gambino, Colombo decided to tip him off. He was now breaking one of the mob's most important rules. Every Mafia family relies on unswerving loyalty from its members. This is one of the so-called 10 Commandments. Your family comes first. Always.
you swear allegiance to that family and only that family. Nothing will come before your family, your mafia. And everything else takes second place to it.
But Colombo completely rejected this. He went straight to the man he'd been told to kill, Carlo Gambino. The move worked well. Gambino was grateful. First, he ordered Colombo's boss, Joe Magliocco, to retire. Then, as a reward for Colombo's bold move, he was given Magliocco's old job. He was promoted to head of a family, renamed in his honor. The Profaci family became the Colombo family in 1964.
Sometimes if you want to advance, you have to make bold moves. Very bold, but it worked out.
Colombo had made Mafia history. He became the youngest godfather in a generation. Thanks to Colombo's new position, there were now real benefits. He could live off the proceeds of crime paid to him by his criminal family members.
Well, if you're the godfather, you're the boss of the family, and depending upon the size of that family, all your capos have to be bringing an envelope up to you. Everything that is brought into the family is kicked up to the head of the family.
Colombo eagerly took over the best money-making operations, and the cash rolled in.
Anywhere where there was money to be made, you could find organized crime.
They know how to make money out of just about anything.
There was illegal gambling. Sometimes games were rigged to earn extra cash.
Well, the gambling racket was basically, you could have a floating crap game or a poker game, and it could be moved anywhere within the city of New York. I mean, it had cocktail waitress and everything. It was a high-end roller, and it still goes on today.
Colombo and his men didn't just make money from the bets, but also from loan sharking to gamblers or anyone who needed cash fast. Loan sharking, or Shylock loans, charged borrowers huge rates of weekly interest, known as the VIG.
Basically, there are many people out there that need money, and banks would not that readily give them the money because they had no financial backing. Organized crime would. Of course, he would pay an interest on the money, almost 25 to 26%. If you miss a payment, they'll double the VIG.
If you carried on missing payments, you could expect a beating, or worse. The loan shark book of any mafia operator could run into hundreds of thousands of dollars of weekly income. It was an easy way to make cash on the street. Colombo also made money from hijacking trucks and cargoes. The stolen goods were then sold on, known as fencing. Added to the mix was extortion, protection rackets, and infamous mafia-run union scams. Unions controlled everything from construction to garbage. So the mafia took over the unions. They plundered the pension funds and set up trade monopolies that benefited only them. As a result, Colombo was getting seriously rich. The only problem was, this wealth began to attract the attention of the police and the FBI. A couple of years into Colombo's reign, the authorities started to look hard at organized crime in New York. In the previous decade, The police and FBI had been slow to recognize the threat posed by the Mafia. Now Colombo and the city's Mafia families were in their sights. In September 1966, the FBI and Queens District Attorney's Office made its first breakthrough. A massive bust at the La Stella restaurant in the east of the city.
La Stella is a restaurant on Queens Boulevard in Queens, and they brought in the mob chiefs from all over the country, and they all sat down and broke bread and went over their operations, and we were able to get information from an informant that they were all there, and we raided the place.
The Queens District Attorney made a big deal of the raid.
These are 13 of the top mob leaders in the country. Their meeting has nationwide implications in our opinion, and as far as we know, this is a unique meeting. We have never had such a meeting of top family leaders and gangdom leaders in this county to our knowledge.
It heralded the start of a new fight back against the mob, and especially the New York families. Colombo, as a family head, was now on the law enforcement radar. In 1966, he was subpoenaed to stand as a witness in a federal investigation into racketeering. It meant appearing before what's known under the American system as a grand jury.
Well, everybody's afraid of what's going to happen in a federal grand jury because it forces people to come in to appear and give testimony, and now you lock them into that testimony.
Colombo could no longer hide in the shadows. He was dragged into a very public arena. But when he came to court, he stuck to mob protocols and refused to testify, insisting he was just an honest businessman.
One of the codes of the mob is don't make yourself a target. Don't make yourself to go out there and bring attention to you and to our operation, what they call our thing, Cosa Nostra.
The code of silence is held by a lot of different groups. And the old bosses believed in keeping a low profile and your mouth.
His strict observance of this tradition cost him. His punishment was 30 days in jail, an easy stretch. But for Joe Colombo, this was an epiphany. He realized what attracted the FBI and police to him was his wealth without any visible source of income. So he devised a perfect solution to deal with a new heat from the FBI. He would become an ordinary working Joe, and he passed down a diktat that all his family members had to hold down a real job too, a facade of legality. Colombo led by example. He worked as a salesman at Cantalupo Realty, based here at 86th Street in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. On their books, the godfather was a $35,000 a year employee. In reality, he conducted his mafia business at the offices. Now, when pressed by the authorities, he could explain his lifestyle. And what a lifestyle it was. The money flooded in from his numerous rackets. And Colombo was starting to get carried away with his status. He headed across town to party and enjoy the good life in Manhattan. He became increasingly flamboyant and extravagant. Bedecked in expensive jewelry and suits, Colombo cruised around the city in flashy Cadillacs.
Joey liked to dress like the biggest actors. He liked to dress as good as Frank Sinatra. He liked to dress as good as Dean Martin. He didn't want to look like the poor schlep. He just didn't buy a suit off the rack. The suits were tailor-made, silk shirts. He had everything made. Everything was tailored. He was meticulous about his clothes.
By now, other mobsters had learned this was not a good idea. Flashing the cash drew the attention of the authorities.
Carlo Gambino, you never see him in a nightclub or a bar or checking out with women. He was just low-key.
And the other Mafia clans were right to worry. Colombo had reignited attention from the FBI and the income tax authorities, who started to look even more closely at his finances. $35,000 a year and tailor-made suits and shirts did not add up. So the FBI decided to go after Colombo. In 1970, his son, Joe Jr., was arrested for melting down silver coins to extract precious metals. Colombo viewed this as a trumped-up charge designed to get at him. It was the final straw. Now, he hit upon a radical solution to the FBI sniffing around his affairs: civil rights. After all, this was a rich time for civil rights activism. Across America, street protest was flourishing. The African-American civil rights movement was changing the face of America and inspired many other minority groups into action.
We're going to walk together. We're going to stand together. We're going to sing together. We're going to stay together. We're going to moan together. We're going to groan together. And after a while, we'll say, freedom, freedom, freedom now!
So Colombo got on the bandwagon. From a campaign office here at 7th Avenue, the former hitman prepared to step fully out of the shadows and into the glare of publicity and politics.
We feel that the people have had it, and the Italian people in particular, in the United States, which number 38 million, have been losing its identity as time has been going on, more and more and more so.
He exploited the growing unrest in the Italian-American community of the time.
He claimed that Italians were being discriminated against. There was some truth in that. At that particular time, you found very few Italian names on Wall Street in law or banking firms. And a lot of Italian Americans were not involved in any kind of organized crime or any other kind of crime.
So, Colombo would stand up for the rights of ordinary Italian Americans. And he started in a way that nobody could have foreseen.
In effect, he declared war on the FBI. So he began picketing FBI headquarters, which was then on the Upper East Side.
It was a remarkable opening salvo, picketing the very heart of law enforcement in New York.
He thought, if I claim that they're discriminating against me, I can either make them back off or slow them down.
Day after day, a crowd of demonstrators harassed FBI agents coming and going and accused them of unduly targeting men like himself who were legitimate businessmen.
Why the FBI? Why is the FBI, in your mind, persecuting the Italians?
He used all his underlings, and we used to call them mooks, M-O-O-K-S, to stand out there and do the picketing for him.
Well, it's obvious by just what everybody could read in the paper. Every time you see something, you see that the FBI is labeling Italian people belonging to an organization which they refer to as the Mafia. As far as we're concerned as Italian people, there is no such thing. It's a word that's been invented by the law enforcement agencies, and we don't feel it's right.
The crowds grew, and media attention followed. Colombo reveled in it.
There's a conspiracy in this country against every Italian American. We've been saying this, we'll continue to say it, and it's only till it touches them. And who are they? Are they any better than you, I, or anybody else standing in this crowd? Litigation on them.
This unspoken challenging of authority was unheard of in Mafia circles. It was in marked contrast to his silence at the grand jury years before. Mafia men, used to speaking in hushed tones of the Cosa Nostra, were unsettled.
I've worked all my life, and if it isn't in the rule of...
Why declare war on law enforcement? You're going to have enough trouble with them as it is. Why make it personal?
The worry growing in the highest circles of the Mafia was law enforcement scrutiny would intensify because of Colombo's actions. But initially, for the FBI agents, it was a new, unsettling tactic. The tables had been turned.
I know a lot of them were very furious with him. There were some collisions there on the picket lines where they almost came to blows.
Now I'll go a little further. Many of the other minority groups are starting to feel this thing. And when they get through with us, they have to go on to the next body of people. And this is where the public should wake up, and this is where the public should start demanding some of these things be brought out to light. And why are they so frightened of an investigation? And why shouldn't there be an investigation on them?
In 1970, Colombo shifted his protest movement up a gear. He created the Italian-American Civil Rights League.
Everybody wanted to be attached to it. Everybody, including the politicians, radio commentators, actors, singers, everybody. And then people started to realize, hey, the Italians contributed a lot, and a lot they should be proud of.
The League, with Colombo at the helm, had huge success almost instantly, recruiting some 50,000 paid-up members to its cause.
Now you see nationality flags. Well, Joe Colombo started it. It was the Italian flag being placed on every Cadillac that was in Brooklyn, owned by an Italian, or a Lincoln owned by an Italian. Every car had an Italian flag on it. Everybody bought into it.
And Colombo's League achieved some notable early victories. They took their campaign to the highest echelons of corporate America. Major brands like General Motors and Alka-Seltzer were targeted. Their ad campaigns were considered demeaning to Italian Americans. The League got them withdrawn. They also got a board game based on the Mafia pulled from Macy's department store. Even Hollywood felt the wrath of the League. Producers of the Godfather movie started to have trouble filming in New York. Production was threatened by walkouts, obstructions, and delays. The League came to the rescue, offering to smooth the process if the producers agreed to remove all references to the Mafia or Cosa Nostra from the script. League captains then toured Italian-American neighborhoods to sell the idea of the film to skeptical residents. Finally, filming was allowed to continue uninterrupted on the landmark Godfather film. Colombo went further still. He even got the New York mayor, prosecutors, and FBI to stop referring to the term Mafia in its official documentation, as it was prejudicial. The city was listening to Joe Colombo, and the League was proving to be highly effective. In 1970, Colombo was ready for the League's showpiece. Its first Italian-American Unity Day rally, to be held in Columbus Circle in the heart of Manhattan. Under the glare of news cameras, 50,000 people attended. The city's traditionally bustling Little Italies were deserted. The other mob families reluctantly allowed Italian-American businesses to close for the day in solidarity.
There was so much press, and the streets were just mobbed with people that were so proud of being Italian, and everybody wanted to get up on the dais to be standing next to Joe Colombo when he spoke of national pride and fellowship.
My fellow Americans,
Colombo held the stage and attacked the law enforcement community.
say to the American government that I'm American.
It was a triumph for the godfather turned activist. In the wake of the rally, interview followed interview. He appeared on TV chat shows and in magazine articles.
I mean, he gave press conferences to all the major newspapers, the Daily News, the New York Mirror, the Post. I mean, every newspaper wanted to hear from him.
Publicly, he continued to describe the Mafia as a myth and promised to champion the rights of all minorities.
Is the Italian-American Civil Rights League accomplishing the aims that were set for it?
Oh, definitely.
What has it done? How's it?
It has helped, not me personally, but helped all people. It has helped people of all ethnic groups. It's helped children. It's helped elderly people. It's helped anyone that needs help. It's made people feel that there are no orphans, and anybody who would want help would only have to ask for it, and they would have it.
Up until now, Colombo's League had preserved an air of legality. However, under Colombo, this positive gloss was wearing thin. Because he was still a mobster, and the League was just another money-making opportunity.
American Civil Rights League was created by Joe Colombo to fight against discrimination. As far as that went, it wasn't a bad idea, but he was the wrong person to be doing something like that. He was the wrong person to be represented as a leader of the Italian-American community.
In fact, Colombo was hijacking a legitimate cause. The League proved to be a money spinner. It was netting him plenty of funds that he could appropriate.
Joe Colombo formed the Italian-American Civil Rights as a racket, as a scam to make money, period. And he used it for that purpose. He was shaking down store owners all over Italian neighborhoods, forcing them to put his sticker in a window. It was an Italian flag with a 1 on it, Italian-American Civil Rights League, and he actually was garnering receipts from that.
A very wise state senator here who was an Italian-American said, Colombo, don't be fooled by Colombo.
Colombo wasn't just breaking the law by skimming off a legitimate cause. He was creating jealousy and suspicion in the Mafia ranks and within his own family. His old mentor, Carlo Gambino, started to warn him.
And he was told by Carlo, stop this. We don't want it. And no ands, ifs, or buts was taken. If you continue, you're going to pay a price.
But Colombo was oblivious to any looming danger. He thought he was untouchable, on the crest of a wave, and a media darling. He wouldn't back down. 1971 was going to be his year.
Colombo was an egotist. He figured he was bigger and better than the unit that he was working with, which was the Mafia.
Then, there was more trouble. The FBI struck again. Angered by Colombo's actions through the Italian-American Civil Rights League, they issued subpoenas for various high-profile bosses. In December 1970, he was arrested, along with one of his men, Rocco Miraglia. When police searched their car, they found a briefcase stuffed full of incriminating documents detailing the various Colombo family rackets. But worse still, the names of other high-ranking mob men. Colombo was immediately called before a federal grand jury to explain himself. But then he did something utterly unforgivable. Rather than keeping his mouth like he had the last time he came before a grand jury, he adopted a different tactic and decided to talk his way out of it. He explained that the dollar amounts next to names were simply donations for his league. Carl, he explained, was none other than Carlo Gambino, reputed Mafia boss. The $30,000 next to his name was actually a donation to the league. That was a bad move. You don't implicate the boss of bosses before a grand jury, especially when you're telling a lie. The repercussions were immediate. That same year, the police department moved in on the Mafia and federal strike forces combed the city. Even Carlo Gambino paid the price. He was arrested in 1970. It was clear that it was Colombo's loose mouth that had got him into deep trouble. With his former protector and with the FBI.
His behavior began to worry bosses like Carlo Gambino.
This incensed the old mafioso. They didn't want that. They wanted silence. They wanted to stay in the shadows. And Joe was bringing them out.
Joe Colombo's days were now numbered. But despite the looming threat, Colombo planned to fight on with his tried and tested formula. He would roll out the league across America. He even booked Frank Sinatra for a fundraiser at Madison Square Gardens. Politicians joined the cause, including State Governor Nelson Rockefeller. And he planned another showcase rally as a platform for his ever-expanding league. This rally would seal his status as a civil rights activist and keep the forces of law and order off his back. But by now, his enemies inside the mob were stirring. An old adversary from his early days as family boss was waiting in the wings. Crazy Joe Gallo was watching events from prison with a critical eye.
Joey Gallo was called Crazy Joe. And there was a reason for that, because he did crazy things.
I'll give you an example of Joe Gallo's operation. They had a club on President Street in Brooklyn. And in the basement, they had a mountain lion that they used to intimidate victims, meaning gambling victims who owed them money or loan sharking victims. And if somebody didn't pay up, they'd just bring them to the club on President Street, open the door to the basement, and down at the bottom of the stairs would be this mountain lion, ready to, and they would do what they were told.
Colombo and Joe Gallo had formed. He and his brothers, Larry and Albert, known as the Gallo clan, had once tried to take over the Colombo family. In the 1960s, they led a bloody insurrection from their base here at President Street in Brooklyn, until Joe Colombo brokered a peace deal with Larry and Albert Gallo, while Crazy Joe was in jail. Now, Crazy Joe was itching to get back at old rival Colombo.
The bottom line is jealousy. Gallo wanted to be the boss of the family, Colombo was the boss of the family, and Gallo wanted to take him out. Simple as that.
Gallo needed soldiers for the forthcoming showdown. And he had a novel idea where to find them. Behind bars, he had made contacts and alliances with African-American gangsters from East Harlem. This was something no one in the Mafia had ever attempted. The two groups were traditionally enemies. But Gallo was ahead of his time. He saw that if the two groups worked together, they could be stronger. Then, in February 1971, Colombo's old enemy, Crazy Joe Gallo, was released after 9 years in prison. Publicly, he swore his Mafia days were over, and he renounced his criminal past. But privately, it was business as usual. He was back on the streets. In his eyes, the peace deal was null and void. As far as he was concerned, the war was never over, and he was preparing for a counterattack. So it was that the stage was set for the second Italian-American Unity Day rally, held in June 1971, at the same site as his triumph a year earlier, New York's Columbus Circle.
They had a huge rally which attracted thousands and thousands of Italian Americans. This was Colombo's rally to rally the Italian people against the FBI and New York City Police Department and law enforcement in general. Now, we were a distance away taking pictures and doing intelligence work, taking plate numbers and observing who was there.
However, something had changed. The Mafia bosses had instructed Italian Americans to stay at work. The League was no longer tolerated. 40,000 fewer people turned out.
Attendance was down then at the next Columbus Day rally. They passed the word that stores should not close and people should not attend.
Just before noon, Colombo headed to the podium to speak. He was preparing to launch another stinging attack on the FBI. An African-American news cameraman with press credentials approached. As the journalists grabbed Colombo's attention for a soundbite, the newsman moved forward.
I was there the day that happened, and lo and behold, up comes this gunman and shoots Colombo in the head. Down he goes.
Then something even more remarkable happened.
And the man that shot him was dead before he hit the floor. So there was actually 2 killings arranged that day. One to have Joe shot, and one to have the shooter killed.
Joe Colombo was immediately rushed to hospital, alive but comatose. Confusion reigned, and supporters were at a loss to explain what had happened.
You know, he was just down on the ground, and there was blood on his right cheek. And it's incredible. You don't expect to see these things in the course of covering a story. And the shots kept coming, and and I was standing like 3 feet or less, and then I started to run. And I heard somebody else's shot, but I wasn't there. I ran.
As far as I know, Joe is in Roosevelt Hospital in critical condition with 2 shot wounds, one in the chest and one in the head. And I understand one of the perpetrators is dead.
You know who did it?
I have no idea. I have no idea who did it.
Did you see it?
No, I did not see it. I was standing behind the stand when it happened.
What's your reaction to this?
The reaction is, right now, there's still a state of confusion as to what really transpired. I'm still trying to piece the information together myself.
The hit on Colombo had been carried out by Jerome Johnson, an African-American from Harlem, but he was a very unlikely killer. He was a drifter and petty criminal with a penchant for stalking girls on a nearby university campus. He had no record as a hitman for the mob. It was a curious discrepancy for New York's chief of detectives, Albert Seidman.
Unfortunately, we have not been able to rule out one possibility or the other. Mr. Johnson is still some sort of a mystery man to us.
What puzzled the police was someone must have told Johnson to undertake the hit and trained him. The question was, who? The African-American link to Harlem pointed to Crazy Joe Gallo.
More and more around town, you hear the gangland theory being pushed that Gallo did make a hit on Colombo.
This is merely conjecture and rumor, but there is no basis to any of it, as far as we have been able to learn thus far.
The simple truth was that other senior Mafia figures must have been at work. Because for over 50 years, no one could be killed without the approval of the Mafia's governing body, the Commission. Every family had a seat on the Commission.
If they had to kill somebody, they had to go to the Commission, and the Commission had to vote on it. This would prevent wide-scale killing and trying to take over different families.
Under its rules, no family head can be rubbed out without the agreement of the other Commission members. The idea was the head of each family had an equal say on how decisions were taken. It was democracy, Mafia style.
First place, you're supposed to have permission of all the other bosses to kill a boss. That's just simple. But bosses can't allow bosses to be killed without the permission of the other bosses. Otherwise, none of them are safe.
Many therefore concluded that Gambino had to be somewhere behind the hit and had sold it to the Commission.
I don't think there was much crying in the Gambino camp or the Gallo camp when Joe Colombo was so seriously wounded.
But as so often with the Mafia, the Columbus Circle shootings and attempt on Colombo's life went unsolved. There was nothing to pin on Gambino.
We're saying that Johnson had some connections with the Carlo Gambino family, but we are not making a statement that that was his exclusive connection with organized crime.
The one man who might know the truth was Crazy Joe Gallo. 11 months later, Crazy Joe was eating with his friends at a seafood restaurant to celebrate his 47th birthday.
They were sitting at a rear table, this group of 6 people, when a man walked in from the back door, and he walked up to the side of the table, and he fired 3 shots. He hit Joe twice, and he hit his bodyguard, Pete the Greek, 1 time.
For the FBI and police investigators, the only explanation had to be Colombo family members out for revenge.
He was killed by elements of the Colombo family. It was ordered by a guy named Joseph Yacovelli, Joe Yak. He was the he was the capo in the Colombo family who ordered the hit.
But if Colombo's shooting was supposed to bring stability back to the Mafia, it actually signaled the slow demise of the Colombo crime family. Because, leaderless and at war, the family's fortunes turned irrevocably downwards. It began to tear itself apart in the decades that followed. The internal power struggles never ended. The Colombo family is now just a shadow of its former self. In 2011, a further 125 of its members were arrested. The family's power has collapsed, for now. As for Joe Colombo, none of this mattered. He never recovered from that day at the rally, He remained in a vegetative state and died 8 years after being shot.
Funeral services were held today for one of America's leading crime figures, Joe Colombo.
If you look at his record, he was only arrested for shooting crap when he was 18 years old. Every other indictment, every other accusation came after he became a civil rights leader. And that was another indication on how the media, particularly, champion what law enforcement often gives them. Joe Colombo has left his mark in American society.
He died a maverick godfather, a former killer who had dared to do things differently. But by taking on Mafia rules and fighting the FBI at the same time, it was a battle he could never win.
His picking in the FBI building and police headquarters was kind of stupid. You know, you're not exactly dealing with the faculty at Harvard.
Perhaps his biggest mistake was to find the world of civil activism more intoxicating than running a crime family.
For a while, he got away with it. People who should have known better joined his committees. He was using civil rights as a shield. In my opinion, he was the fool.
Fame would offer Joe Colombo no protection from a failure to obey the most fundamental Mafia principles.
All Joe Colombo's troubles were brought on by himself. I mean, if he had followed the rules of the mob, particularly the mob bosses, and stay out of the limelight and just operate your business and bring money in, he never would have had a problem. But because he became flamboyant and he got his ego swelled, he decided to go out into the public world, which was a major error.
In any case, the high-profile Civil Rights League he founded virtually disappeared overnight. Charles Lucky Luciano, the #1 gangster of all time. Intelligent, ruthless, and a visionary. Luciano transformed the Mafia from warring street gangs into a highly sophisticated empire. Under Luciano, the Mafia grew to be bigger than General Motors. And by the time he'd finished, the mob was raking in $40 billion a year.
Lucky Luciano is a quintessential American. Using his cunning and his intelligence, rises to a position of fantastic power and wealth.
This is the story of the man who put the organized into organized crime.
One man changed the whole texture and landscape of crime in America. There's no question that Luciano invented the modern mafia.
But where were the law enforcers? Why was nobody able to stop him? On September the 10th, 1931, 4 hitmen came calling at offices above Grand Central Station in New York City. Their target, New York's top mafia boss, Salvatore Maranzano. This execution was a critical moment in the meteoric rise of the biggest gangster in American history, Charles "Lucky" Luciano.
Once in every generation comes along a dynamic criminal genius mind. And the Mafia in America was blessed that they had Lucky Luciano.
Luciano had begun his career as a top hitman for New York Mafia don Giuseppe "Joe the Boss" Masseria. Masseria headed the largest Italian gang in the city and ruled the streets in the early 1920s. But in 1925, another boss arrived in town. His name was Salvatore Maranzano, from the infamous mafia town of Castellammarese del Golfo in Sicily. And he was eager to seize control of Masseria's empire. When tensions mounted between the two leaders, the killings began. The streets of New York turned red. The underworld called it the Castellammarese War. But for one man, all this chaos was the opportunity he was waiting for. Luciano had always been against the bloodbath, arguing that gunfights and bodies were bad for business and attracted too much police attention. Luciano also despised the old ways of his warring boss, Masseria. Luciano wanted to build bridges with Jewish and Irish gangsters. He believed their networks were essential to the success of the Mafia's international businesses. But Masseria was fiercely opposed to any non-Italian partnerships.
People like Masseria hardly spoke English. They couldn't communicate. It was a different generation. And Lucky understood this and they didn't.
After 18 months of fighting, with no end in sight, Maranzano told Luciano that if Masseria was eliminated, he would not take revenge on his men. Luciano shared Maranzano's vision and made him an offer. He would kill his boss, Masseria, if he could take over his gang and become an equal power with Maranzano. Maranzano accepted the deal. Luciano invited Masseria to a lunchtime meeting at one of his favorite restaurants, the Nova Villa Tamaro, in Coney Island, New York. While they played cards, Luciano's hitmen waited outside for his signal. With Masseria's murder, Luciano signaled to the underworld that the Castellammarese War was over. Maranzano then called hundreds of gang members from across the country to a meeting in the Bronx to announce his victory.
Now it's going to be different,
he told them, and spelled out his grand plan. The gangs of New York would be organized into 5 families to control the boroughs of the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and Staten Island. Each family would be headed by a boss with an underboss, and under them would be lieutenants and soldiers. And above them all would be Maranzano himself. And if anyone disagreed, they would be killed.
I'm going to be capo di tutti capi, the boss of all bosses.
This meant that he would be the leader of all the New York Mafia operations. His speech enraged Luciano. Maranzano had backtracked on his promise of equality, and now Luciano was determined to strike back. Maranzano realized Luciano was a potential threat to his total dominance of the American Mafia. So Maranzano contracted the notorious Irish killer, Vincent Mad Dog Cole, to get rid of Luciano. Cole was a lone, out-of-town hitman for hire and would be perfect for the job. But Luciano learned the details of the plan. Maranzano would call him into his office for a business meeting, and Mad Dog Cole would be waiting there to kill him. For Luciano, it was now a question of kill or be killed. The problem was how to kill Maranzano. He was extremely well protected, never without bodyguards, and always traveled in a bulletproof car. Tax agents and accountants were frequent visitors to Maranzano's offices, and Luciano realized that this was his way in. On the day Luciano was to have his meeting with Maranzano, he would send his hitmen instead, all posing as taxmen. As an extra touch, they would be Jewish, as he knew Maranzano despised them. Luciano then contacted his childhood friend, Meyer Lansky, to arrange the hit. It is said that Lansky then rented a remote house in the Bronx for the four killers to prepare for the hit. They were forbidden to leave the house and were provided with all the provisions they required, including women. And through the summer months of 1931, Lansky taught them how to talk, walk, and act like taxmen. Then in September, the call came through. Maranzano told Luciano to come to his office to discuss urgent business. On September the 10th, 1931, Luciano sent the four hitmen to Maranzano's offices above Grand Central Station in New York. The gangsters entered his office and drew their knives, a weapon chosen to kill their victim in silence. But Maranzano would not go down without a fight. He took multiple stab wounds to his body, a slashed throat. He was still alive. The killers were forced to do it the noisy way. With the death of Maranzano, Luciano's time had come. At last, Luciano would realize his vision to reach out across America and organize organized crime. One of the first people he turned to was someone he'd known since they were both street kids. Luciano started out by offering protection to Jewish schoolboys targeted by Irish gangs. One day, he squared up to a small boy on his way home.
If you want to keep alive, Jew boy, you gotta pay us 5 cents week protection money.
The schoolboy stared him in the eye and told him to
go yourself.
It was Meyer Lansky, a young Polish immigrant and the man who Luciano had turned to when he needed hitmen for Maranzano's execution.
From day one, we're talking when they're in their early teens, they knew each other. They were thugs then. But they developed this relationship where they built it into an empire.
Meyer Lansky became Luciano's right-hand man and chief business executive. He was tough, brilliant with numbers, and, unusually for a mobster, honest.
The relationship between Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky is the most important relationship in organized crime in the United States.
Critically, Lansky was able to do complex calculations in his head without committing anything to paper.
These are two incredibly talented and open-minded individuals who realized that if they joined forces using an American corporation as a model, that they could eliminate the possibility of an individual monopolizing profits, and they could share profits and distribute them evenly, and therefore bring a certain stability to organized crime that had never existed before.
And there was another Jewish gangster to get Luciano to think big. Arnold Rothstein. Known along Broadway as the Brain, the Big Bankroll, and the Fixer, Rothstein was a fabulously rich New York businessman.
There were things that Rothstein was doing that nobody else was doing, and Luciano saw the possibilities.
Rothstein could bring off rackets that no one else could dream of.
Arnold Rothstein was famous as the man who fixed the 1919 World Series. This is a prime example of racketeering. You take a normal activity like a baseball game, you corrupt the players, therefore you can bet on a winning thing.
Rothstein tutored him there about how real money could be made, not just in low-level predatory street crime, that there were bigger things, you could fix things.
And sure enough, bigger things were about to come along for Luciano. In 1919, the US government did an incredible thing. It banned alcohol, believing that it was leading to the moral destruction of the nation. The ban was known as Prohibition, and with America wanting to drink, it was a gift to organized crime gangs, especially in the thirstiest cities like New York.
They saw a real gold mine in Prohibition. And what it did was it turned some of them, like Luciano, they had to become executives. Because now they had to run organizations that either imported booze or manufactured it, and they had to distribute it. So in that sense, they had to run a real organization. It wasn't just go out and mug somebody on the street. You had to be smart now, because you were dealing, instead of thousands, you were dealing with millions. So it turned these people who were really inexperienced, old-fashioned outlaws into business criminal executives overnight.
Luciano, Lansky, and Rothstein proved to be quick learners, and soon they became very rich indeed.
Now that wealth translates into power. It translates into political power. It means that you can buy political protection. It means that you can buy police protection because alcohol is something everybody wants to do. So they are willing to collude with gangsters. What they don't understand is that once you cooperate with gangsters, you've sold your soul, and the gangsters understood this.
With New York City full of booze, and cops, judges, and council officials being bribed all over the place, Luciano and his associates had free rein to take control of whatever they wanted.
They had their hand in everything because nobody would look at them. Nobody would even consider investigating them, not the least of which was J. Edgar Hoover.
There is nothing mysterious about the manner in which the Federal Bureau of Investigation works. A special agent must be a good marksman and have the courage to shoot it out with the most venomous of public enemies.
Director Hoover supervising field practice. And
J. Edgar Hoover was the boss of the FBI, and he was eager to make a name for himself.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the paramount law enforcement, and the only national law enforcement agency that could really combat the Mafia, and they didn't do a thing.
Hoover had launched his war on crime during the early 1930s. He went after bank robbers, kidnappers, and killers who were terrorizing the Midwest and outraging the nation.
The FBI mostly went after the headline public enemies like John Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd,
Machine Gun Kelly, taking people out with,
Hoover had essentially denied that there was a national crime syndicate. He said these are local gangsters and this is the job of the local police to deal with it. He didn't want to get involved with these people because they're very well connected politically.
Realizing nobody was going to come after him, Luciano was able to expand his vision and develop new ways for the Mafia to grow.
Luciano saw and could predict that by the late 20s, Prohibition was going to end in America.
And if the Mafia was going to be successful, Luciano had to prevent inter-mob wars from ever breaking out again.
It was terrible for business, and it also threw a spotlight on him. That's why I say he was something like a Bill Gates or a Warren Buffett, and he had to get a different business model.
So, towards the end of 1931, Luciano summoned the top leaders of 20 Mafia factions across the country, including gangsters like Al Capone, to a national conference in Chicago. Luciano then did an extraordinary thing. He proposed an entirely new business structure for organized crime.
He laid out the rules. Here's how we're going to operate. This whole concept that had never existed before, he created a whole new texture, a whole new way of how criminals could operate in America, organized criminals. What he did was he turned predatory street gangs, which had many internal and external wars with each other, he turned them into this one single octopus of an organization that was so different from anything else that ever existed. And it took the American law enforcement almost 60 years to get a handle on it. It was so terrific.
Luciano kept with Maranzano's 5 New York families, but to each family he added a consigliere, a skilled counselor and advisor, whose task was to ensure that problems within families were resolved without the need for violence. Luciano then unveiled his most striking innovation without precedent in the Sicilian Mafia or amongst American gangsters.
Luciano, he created the commission, and the commission would be the board of directors. If any rules for the Mafia throughout the country had to be changed, it would be up to the commission. And if there were any territorial disputes or disputes over rackets, the commission would take care of it. Now, the concept there was to prevent wars.
It is almost precisely what the various countries around the world did when they were faced with the same problem post-World War II. They created the United Nations. One could actually take the UN Charter and for most of it substitute the word families for states and Cosa Nostra for the organization for the United Nations and Commission for Security Council, and the rules would be identical.
As proof of his good intentions, Luciano introduced one other startling change. He would be just one amongst equals. There would be no boss of all bosses. Instead, Luciano introduced a more democratic form of leadership. The commission would consist of a board of 7 family directors, 5 in New York and 1 each in both Chicago and Buffalo. Each would have a single vote with all the decisions determined by the majority. This would ensure all the leaders of the most powerful families had an equal say.
He was this incredible, dynamic genius who saw how the landscape and how the tapestry of the Mafia had to be organized. Here is somebody who comes along in 1931 and envisions that if the Mafia was going to prevail and succeed, it had to be a mirror image of American capitalism.
Luciano had come up with a business structure. It would last for the next 50 years. And because it worked so perfectly, everything was now up for grabs.
But the commission was the second government of this country. It really was. They actually controlled a lot of industries in this country, not the least of which was the restaurant business, the gambling industry. Las Vegas is a great example of it.
They had control of the garment industry, the meat industry, the fish market, the docks, the unions, loan sharking, drugs and prostitution.
Luciano said he was going to turn prostitution into an industry like the A&P, which is a supermarket chain.
They were all powerful.
And they were making billions of dollars a year. And what was good for the Mafia was good for Luciano, too.
By 1930 standards, Lucky Luciano wasn't even a multi-millionaire anymore, he was a billionaire.
Luciano took a suite in one of the most luxurious hotels in the world, the Waldorf Astoria, and checked in under the name of Charles Ross to protect himself from rival gangsters.
The kind of money he was reaping in millions every week, and he suddenly became a really sharp dresser. Had ladies on his arms all the time, had a private plane. He flew around to racetracks all over the country.
Luciano was also a bachelor and party animal. He rose late, wore handmade suits and shoes from England, and danced the nights away with chorus girls and nightclub singers.
And he operated in this kind of almost open fashion as this suave, debonair type who could roam around New York, nightclubs, he had pieces of everything.
Luciano wined and dined with politicians and rubbed shoulders with stars like Frank Sinatra and the actor of many classic gangster films, George Raft. Luciano's high life was getting him noticed elsewhere. FBI agents began to work out that he was a key player in the underworld, but they had surprisingly little information on him. One statement described Luciano as the leading racketeer along Italian lines, is very powerful and made considerable money in liquor. another declared, Charles Luciano, alias Lucky, is the head of the underworld in New York. And an FBI memo had Luciano in a conspiracy to smuggle drugs from Europe into the United States. They also had in their hands local police records, which showed Luciano had been arrested 35 times for offenses ranging from traffic violations to assault and robbery with a gun. But despite this evidence, the FBI still decided to ignore him. But there was a man determined to get Luciano. His name was Thomas E. Dewey.
We have made a real start on cleaning the gangsters out of New York.
Dewey was a fiercely ambitious lawyer who, by the age of just 33, had got the top job as New York City's special prosecutor to crack down on organized crime.
In 2 years, we have shown that our people can be protected, that they can be delivered from the grip of the mob.
In the 1930s, Luciano was the face of organized crime.
It was an open secret how important and how big he was.
And Dewey was after him. He realized that Luciano must be making vast sums of money from his criminal enterprises to finance his luxurious lifestyle.
Today, crime is syndicated and organized. A new type of criminal exists who leaves to his hirelings and frontmen the actual offenses and rarely commits an overt act himself. The only way in which the major criminal can be punished is by connecting him to those various layers.
But Dewey had a tough time finding anything he could pin on him. Luciano was careful with every step he took. He was wary of wiretaps, cautious with his telephone conversations, and like his close friend, Meyer Lansky, kept no records on paper. All the incriminating details were in his head. Then, out of the blue, Dewey was offered a lead that could ensnare Luciano in a web of vice crime. A series of police wiretaps in local brothels uncovered clues that an organization called the Combine controlled around 300 establishments in Manhattan and Brooklyn. They discovered that a top Luciano enforcer named David Little Davy Batillo was overseeing the Combine operations. In January 1936, Dewey's investigators raided 80 brothels in the New York City area and arrested over 100 prostitutes and madams.
These arrested women were definitely placed between a rock and a hard place. They had nowhere to go.
The cops started to put the women under real pressure to spill the beans on Luciano.
So many of them were addicted to heroin when they were arrested. Cops waited until the 4th day of the cold turkey withdrawal when they were climbing the walls and desperate to get them to agree to testify against the mob.
Dewey's investigators managed to get 3 or 4 people to flip, to turn. And incredibly, they claimed that they had seen Luciano at meetings where he discussed what kind of percentage his family was getting from these whorehouses.
Even before the trial had commenced, the newspapers had Luciano convicted. The New York Daily News headlined him the droopy-eyed Tsar of the oldest profession. trial began on May the 12th, 1935. Dewey reigned forth in his opening statement.
Luciano will be shown not to have placed any of the women in houses or taken money from them. Instead, he set up his apartment in the Waldorf Astoria and was the czar of the ring. We will show that Luciano's function was to rule. All other defendants were his servants.
Dewey lined up 68 witnesses, mainly hookers, pimps, and madams, who had been promised shorter sentences, immunity, or probation from aiding the prosecution. Dewey's main strategy was to depict the prostitutes as desperate victims of the Depression, exploited and terrorized by the Combine's ruthless enforcers.
The madam who was hit over the head with the lead stick, for example, went on the witness stand to testify that there was blood all over the place when she was attacked by the very men who were sitting there in the defendant's area.
One of the key witnesses was the notorious Madam Cokie Flo.
Cokie Flo's testimony was typical of the testimony that all of the women gave on the witness stand. It was hearsay. She heard Luciano was going to bring everybody together like a chain of supermarkets. She heard this and she heard that.
The idea that he would discuss in the presence of prostitutes, even a madam, the kind of mundane business stuff just didn't work. It looked like a fix. They got these witnesses to really exaggerate or to invent testimony.
At this stage in the trial, with doubt being cast over the evidence, everything seemed to be going in Luciano's favor. But then, Luciano made a big mistake. Against his lawyer's advice, he insisted on taking to the witness stand to deny all charges.
Dewey's demeanor while interviewing Lucky Luciano while Luciano was under oath on the witness stand was very brilliant. He got him to show his underworld side, the side that wasn't very funny to most people, wasn't very suave or sophisticated to others.
For 4 hours, Dewey pummeled him with questions about his life, his previous convictions, his taxes, his association with other gangsters, and proved that he was lying in answer after answer.
He was really lacerated by Dewey's question.
I am asking you, do you tell the truth when you are under oath?
I'm telling the truth now.
You don't want to answer that question, do you?
I didn't say I told the truth all the time, but now I'm telling the truth.
Dewey's onslaught had now reduced Luciano to a perspiring, squirming wreck. Far from being an honest businessman, he was revealed as a tax evader.
You have not paid a dime to the state government yet, is that right?
That's right.
And that is because the federal state prosecutes big gangsters and the state does not by income tax. Isn't that so?
I don't know.
Dewey even brought out information, very embarrassing to Luciano, that he had once, when he was a young man, had been an informer in a narcotics investigation. So it made his whole reputation look a little tainted. Here was this top guy. Turned out that once he had been a rat to save his skin.
In the end, Dewey's summation to the jury described Luciano's testimony as
a shocking, disgusting display of sanctimonious perjury, at the end of which I am sure not one of you had a doubt that before you stood not a gambler, not a bookmaker, but the greatest gangster in America.
And Dewey managed to persuade the jury to the end. Luciano was convicted on 62 counts of compulsory prostitution. Justice McCook gave the sentence.
I am not here to reproach you.
But since there is no excuse for your conduct nor for your rehabilitation, to administer adequate sentence, I hereby pronounce a sentence to serve from 30 to 50 years.
The sentence probably did not fit the crime, but it was an instrument on the part of Dewey and the prosecutor's office to try to rid New York of the elements of organized crime that were the most threatening.
Dewey was a crime-busting hero, and it was the start of his meteoric career. He became the governor of New York in 1942 and twice ran for presidency.
Once the alliance between criminals and politicians is smashed, racketeering will come to a prompt end.
In his memories of the case, Luciano wrote,
I still get madder at Dewey's crap more than anything else. That little with the mustache comes right out and admits he got me for everything else but what he charged me with. He knew I didn't have a to do with prostitution, not with none of them broads. But Dewey was such a goddamn racketeer himself in a legal way that he crawled up my back with a frame and stabbed me.
Luciano tried to fight back. He appealed against his sentence. And he ordered for the prostitutes who testified against him to be rounded up so they could now say they had lied in court.
They met up with the mobsters, all is forgiven kind of mentality, and re-addicted to heroin almost immediately. Once they were re-addicted, they brought them cross-country to offices in California, signed briefs that they were rescinding their prior testimony and that they did not mean it, that they told a bunch of lies.
But despite his efforts, Luciano's appeal failed. Luciano was sent to the isolated maximum security Clinton Penitentiary in Dannemora, near the Canadian border. Nicknamed Siberia, it was 500 miles away and a far cry from the luxurious trappings of his Manhattan life.
What a come down from a suite at the Waldorf Towers to a cell.
When they told me I was going to Dannemora, I wasn't sure I could make it. It meant moving out of the Waldorf Towers into a sewer. The worst part of it was we didn't have any connections up there, and that meant I was in for a rough time. I was willing to put up $1 million bond, and I told them that as soon as I heard that I was going to Dannemora. But once they had me, they wasn't gonna let me go.
But anyone who thought Luciano was finished was mistaken. His foresight in setting up the commission now showed itself.
When he was sentenced, the family didn't dissolve. The organization continued to function. And this is, again, the wisdom of Lucky Luciano, that even though he, the originator, is the first boss to be convicted, he proves his point. It functions well.
Although Luciano remained the boss, Frank Costello, a highly regarded and well-known figure in New York's underworld, took over the day-to-day running of his empire. And Costello continued to bring in millions of dollars and increase the family's fortunes, while his boss planned his next move. And Luciano didn't have to wait long. When America entered the Second World War in 1942, he found that his country needed him. The war in the Atlantic was going badly for the Allies. US government was concerned their crucial East Coast docks were under serious threat.
It's the keystone to the war effort on the East Coast. One ship, a French ship in Normandy, caught on fire and sank.
Sparked by an acetylene torch, swept through the proud ship. Thousands of workmen fled for their lives as firemen from all parts of New York and neighboring cities fought the fire around
The prevailing opinion is that it was accidental, but the U.S. Navy and a lot of other government officials believed it could have been sabotage.
Naval intelligence, desperate to prevent further attacks and German spies from infiltrating the docks, sought the help of the mobsters who controlled the waterfronts. But if they were going to get the help of the dockers, they had to get the Mafia's permission first.
Luciano was so powerful that the Mafia bosses would not consent. These are not patriots. They're not stepping up to the government and saying, yes, sir, and saluting. They're saying, we have to get approval from the boss, our boss. Our boss is not the President of the United States. Our boss is Lucky Luciano, and he's in prison.
To win Luciano's support, the first thing the US government did was move Luciano from the harsh conditions of Dannemora to a prison known as the Country Club of the penal system, Grand Meadow, close to New York. Here, Luciano began negotiations with the authorities and his men.
And sure enough, Luciano acts like he's a patriot now, even though he was still an Italian citizen and never a naturalized American citizen. And he sends out the word through Lansky and other couriers, peace on the waterfront. Not only would there be no sabotage, there would be no work stoppages. Things were going to run smoothly. It's the word from the boss. What an example. A man in prison has so much power that he can control the essential harbor in New York City. If you need any testimonial to his power, that's it.
Luciano then asked for a pardon. He had delivered his side of the bargain and now wanted freedom.
Guess who's the governor of New York at that time? No other person but Thomas E. Dewey.
In an extraordinary irony, Dewey, the man who put him away for 30 to 50 years, granted Luciano executive clemency in 1946 on the condition that he was deported to Italy and that he would never be allowed back in the US. Dewey's resentment was clear.
Upon the entry of the United States into the war, Luciano's aid was sought by the armed services in inducing others to provide information concerning possible enemy attack. It appears that he cooperated in such an effort, although the actual value of the information produced is not clear.
Luciano had served just 10 years of his 50-year sentence when he left American shores on February the 10th, 1946, bound for Sicily. But within months, Luciano was traveling from Italy to Havana, Cuba, and was back in business. A week-long meeting was held at the Hotel Nacional, where Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello, and other high-ranking Mafia members discussed the heroin trade.
He was involved in numerous narcotics deals because Italy at that time was really becoming important in the transfer of narcotics, not just to the US, but worldwide. Heroin was becoming a big money maker for the Mafia.
In 1957, in Palermo, Sicily, Luciano was reported to be overseeing meetings with more than 30 Sicilian and American Mafia leaders to create the world's largest heroin exporting rackets. Five years later, in 1962, Luciano was targeted for arrest as an alleged member of a ring that smuggled $150 million worth of heroin into the United States. But before the authorities could get him, Luciano died of a heart attack in Italy. He was 65.
A guy who could demand respect. Luciano was the power to be. He ran the show, willing to resort to violence if he had to. And the system worked. I mean, the guy was good.
Charles Lucky Luciano's reign had been a remarkable one. He transformed the Mafia from the warring street gangs into a highly sophisticated empire. Under Luciano, the Mafia grew to be bigger than General Motors. And by the time he'd finished, the mob was raking in $40 billion a year. And while there had been run-ins with the local law enforcement agencies, the FBI hadn't even known it existed. And if anyone likes to think of Luciano as a criminal genius, they should not forget that he had many people killed, condemned many others to drug addiction and prostitution, and left a terrible wake of misery and suffering behind him.